Yep, that's me. That's a highly photoshopped version of me. This is the real me we got here. I created Aptitude Outdoors quite a long time ago, almost a decade ago now, because I just really love the outdoors. I love wildlife. I am obsessive about fly fishing, hunting, being outdoors, seeing cool critters. That's what I love. And I'll tell a little story here too. I also have created this brand, Wild Man of the Woods, by accident. I had never planned on doing this, but now I make Bigfoot documentaries on the side too, because it helps fund my camera equipment. So I really enjoy it, but I'm going to start with this picture. This is from last year. This is something I never thought I'd do. I'm definitely like an out-of-water guy, not a big beach goer, not a big ocean vacation kind of guy, but I got a good friend who you'll see quite a bit throughout this presentation there on the right. That's my good friend Chester Moore. He's a one-of-a-kind guy. He's been my mentor in this wildlife world. He writes for Texas Fish and Game magazine. He's the editor. He has done wildlife his entire career. And I get a call one day that you don't say no to. He said, "Can you meet me in Boston next week to go film a shark documentary?" I said, I think I can make that happen. So I hop on a plane, go to Boston Airport, worst airport I've ever been to in my life, and we get off the plane, and next thing I know, it's 6 in the morning, and I am inches away from a 12-foot great white shark. That is the great white shark right there. It's one of those moments you have in your life where you're like, what the heck am I doing? Because I'm a tall guy. That railing is at my waist, and the water is not very calm. As you can see, it's a little choppy. And if I fell in the water there, it would not have been a good time for me. So I'm staring into the camera, as I do often. My life revolves on a screen about this big most of the time. And my eye focuses past it, and I see the shark in the water, and I'm like, how did I get here? So thanks, Craig, for inviting me to do this. It was a good opportunity for me to look back on, where I came from in this career. And it all started a long time ago. My wife and I thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2015. I graduated from the University of Toledo. I was born in Toledo, Ohio. I still live in Toledo, Ohio. I live in Sylvania Township. I do love it here. But I got an anthropology degree at the University of Toledo, and my professors were all very upset with me because I skipped graduation and headed to Georgia. 6 months of my life was dedicated to being outdoors, and it is the best thing I've ever done with my life, hands down, because not only did it show me, that I'm capable of doing what I put my mind to, but it reinforced that I love nature and the outdoors more than anything. That is, my entire life revolves around nature and the outdoors, whether it's, like I said, the Bigfoot stuff, whether it's filming wildlife, whether it's filming hunts, whether it's, traveling on my own just to go see places that I've always wanted to go. That's where it all started. And then when I got home from that, I don't know if you guys attend any of the Wood County Park stuff often. In the background there, that's my buddy Bill Heflin. My wife, our friend Amanda, and me, we all kayaked the entire length of the Maumee River. That was my local version of a thru hike. I'd always wanted to do it, and we drove up to Indiana, put our boats in, and kayaked all the way back to Toledo. It was a really fun time, and it was a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be. The Maumee River is kind of brutal. It doesn't move as fast as it looks. And as Craig mentioned, I had a TV show for a little while around here, and that's really where my passion with filming.
How long did it take you to?
4 days.
Okay.
We just cruised right along. And I did a stint on a TV show here. It was called Take It Outside. And I had never owned a camera before besides a little GoPro, a little pocket cam. So I went out and bought this camera at Best Buy. Couldn't afford it. My grandpa had a few Nikon lenses from an old camera that fit on the body. That was my first zoom lens I ever had, and I realized you could shoot wildlife with it from pretty far away, and I got completely obsessed with it, like beyond obsessed. And that's where I'm at today. That cheap camera and that hand-me-down lens got me here. I just bought an 800mm lens the other day, which is about this long, so it's a long way, but it's been awesome. You might recognize the guy in this picture back there. That's Craig. Lots of cool stuff to do around Toledo. People don't notice. This was a kayak rendezvous out in Put-in Bay. And this was a really cool trip for me. We kayaked who knows how many miles out in Lake Erie, but something also that I'm very passionate about aside from wildlife filmmaking is fishing. I am 200%. I was probably more obsessed with fishing than I am with anything else on this earth. It's all I think about. It's all I dream about is fish. And this particular trip, we kayaked about a mile into Lake Erie. There's an island. Everybody in the photo except me was excited to go check out this island. But in my head, I knew that this is where smallmouth gather around this island. So they all went, and I sat on the ground, or I sat around the island with a fishing pole and fished the entire hour they were gone. I finally caught a smallmouth bass. That had been a huge goal of mine, catch a Lake Erie smallmouth. Caught it in a kayak, ripped my glove in half, but you can tell I'm pretty excited, and it reminds me of the meme. Which island? Do you remember what island that was, Craig? It was like, you can see it from Put in Bay. I don't remember the exact name of it. It's like an abandoned island.
The one off to the west, there's an abandoned church on it.
Yeah.
Is it Rattlesnake?
Yes, it's Rattlesnake Island.
So yeah, there's tons of smallmouth in there. I caught 2 of them that day. I was so excited, and this picture always reminds me, if you've seen the meme where it's like photos of my husband with me and he just looks like this, you know, whatever. And then it's like my husband with a fish. Like, that's me 100%. So fishing is my #1 passion, aside from wildlife filmmaking. And then I had a podcast for quite a few years called the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. That kind of evolved into this filmmaking business I started. And I met this guy right here, Derek York. He lives in Houston, Texas. He sent me an email randomly one day, and he said, hey, I'm starting this event. It's called the Hunt Fish Podcast Summit. I'm getting a bunch of conservationists together. I'm getting a bunch of people together, and we're going to go down to Texas, and we're just going to podcast and talk. This is my first ever turkey hunt. No turkeys were harmed in the making of this picture. Nobody got any turkeys that year. But I've had a very good relationship with Derek since then, and he's introduced me to a ton of people that have, you know, helped me in this industry. And I still am part of the Hunt Fish Podcast Summit to this day. We just did our 5th year this year, and it's grown quite a bit. And this is a very cool day for me. That's Chester Moore, who's become one of my best friends on earth. I just got back from Florida with him on Saturday. We went fishing down there. We drove down to the Key West to film Key Deer, which I'll talk about later. And behind him, I don't know if you guys are into heavy metal, but that is like one of the most iconic heavy metal singers of all time. His name is Eric Adams. He's from a band called Manowar. And my first time turkey hunting was with that guy. So look him up if you don't know who he is. You'll see that guy in front of like 10,000 people in stadiums all over the world. It's insane. I still can't believe that I met that guy and got to go hunting with him for a week. Very cool experience. I've been very lucky in this industry of nothing having to do with me. It's just pure luck. And that led me to, I've always wanted to make documentaries. I didn't know how. I didn't go to film school. I have an anthropology degree. Basically taught me how to interview people. So I was like, if I can figure out how to learn how to use these cameras and tell a story a little bit, I can make a documentary. So my first documentary I ever made was about what is hunting. I didn't come from a hunting family. Never understood hunting. I was like, what is this? Why is this so many people so obsessive about this? So it's called The Hunt Within. And during that process of filming, again, very lucky for me, I got to meet and interview the CEO of the Wild Sheep Foundation and his wife, the founder of the Women Hunt program of the Wild Sheep Foundation, Gray Thornton and Renee Thornton. They've become great friends of mine, and they've helped me quite a bit in this industry. So always very grateful to them. You know, you never know what's going to happen. You end up meeting these people, and life just takes you to weird places. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then that's my good friend Seth Geib. I don't know if you guys follow him on Instagram. Locally, he's a very good wildlife photographer. He's been all over the country with me and helped me film a ton of documentaries, and he's just been a good friend of mine. This is my friend Derek, who I had mentioned earlier, is also a charter captain, and he invited me down to Texas once to go fishing in the ocean, which the first time I ever went fishing in the ocean, I was so seasick, I just laid on the boat the whole time and vomited. That was all I could handle. So this is my true first ocean fishing experience. I caught a black-tip shark, which I didn't know was a thing that you could catch. So that was a very cool experience for me. That got me hooked on filming in the ocean, being in the ocean. I've never been someone who's been excited about the beach ever. I just think it's the most boring thing ever to me. I'm very ADHD. I cannot sit still. I can't just sit on the beach and hang out. So fishing in the ocean is cool because it's like a mystery grab bag. There's so many fish down there. You never know what's going to pop up, and I'm absolutely obsessed with it. And then this leads to the Bigfoot in the title. This is part of my accidental Bigfoot experience. My friend Chester, he speaks at a lot of Bigfoot conferences. He has a podcast called Dark Outdoors Podcast, and it kind of delves into like the creepier side of the outdoors, like murder, mysteries, meets outdoors, meets, you know, he's very into that kind of stuff. And he was giving a presentation about, I think there's like some sort of phantom killer mystery thing that happened around Fouke, Arkansas. And he was giving a presentation. He goes, hey, come down here, let's fish. If you can film my presentation, you know, you go to this conference. I was like, sure, dude, I'll come and do that. That sounds fun. This is like a famous thing if you're into Bigfoot, the Monster Mart in Fouke, Arkansas. And he gave his presentation. And I was like, dude, I'm here. I have a camera. What if I made a Bigfoot documentary? We're at a Bigfoot conference. So he goes, yeah, I'll have my friend come out and do an interview with you. And it just happened to be Ken Gerhard, which is, if you watch History Channel, Discovery Channel, all the Bigfoot shows, he's like one of the main guys. So my first Bigfoot interview was this guy. Very fun. He's a very nice guy. And I did not think about Bigfoot after that at all. You know, I watched the shows growing up. I had a lot of fun with it. And I went home, I made a little short documentary on a YouTube channel, uploaded it. As with every other YouTube video I've ever made, I thought it would get 30 views and it would be the end of it. Didn't check it for a year. I made a YouTube channel just to put this on. I came back months later and opened it, and it had like 170,000 views, and I was like, what the heck is going on here? So that's where that started. No idea what I was doing. It was just a fun little side project, and there's a lot more of that to come. So this is not long after that. My friends here, Mike Mathis and Kyle Smith, invited me to do something called an adventure race. I didn't know what that was. It was a grueling experience. You basically bike, run, kayak, canoe, run through the forest trying to find waypoints. And you know, we're all outdoors guys, so we knew how to land navigate. And we just gave it all we had. No expectations. It's supposed to be a fun guys weekend. And we're sitting at the table, and they're giving out awards. And then literally not paying attention at all. And they called our team name, and we were like, we lose, like, get like worst time. And we walked up there, like, gave us the first place trophy. And we're like, how did this happen? None of us are in that great of shape. This is insane. So randomly we won an adventure race. And that was really cool too, because that kind of gave me like confidence to be in the outdoors even more, which for stuff I do now, which is like backcountry filming and you're out in the middle of nowhere. I guess I was good enough to win that. I don't know how. I still have no idea. Mike has he's like a head of a park district somewhere. He's got a big fancy job, so we let him put the plaque in his office, but I still have my little wooden medallion. And then, you know, after seeing that Bigfoot documentary took off, we went to Salt Fork State Park, which is one of the, if you are into the Bigfoot stuff, most renowned Bigfoot places in the world. And I met this guy named John Hickenbottom, who is a park ranger there. And we recorded just him telling stories about the park, Bigfoot encounters that happened there, did a little historical research, went mostly just to film the beautiful park. It's a beautiful park and to fish. I fished there. Very fun. Uploaded that, put it out on Halloween. That documentary went insane. It got like 200,000 views in the first couple of days, and I'm like, what is happening? So for me, it's very important because in my mind, it's always conservation first. Wildlife conservation is first for me in every scenario. And, you know, not that many people are interested in watching 45-minute documentaries about me talking about the North American model of wildlife conservation, but 200,000 people will watch a Bigfoot documentary. So I always include a very heavy conservation message in these documentaries because it's very important to me. And then, you know, after that, I'm always bouncing around everywhere I go. There's a show in Florida called iCast. It's all the new fishing equipment that comes out and blah, blah, blah. And so my friend Derek, who runs the podcast summit, invited me down to help him, you know, get sponsors and do all that kind of stuff. Oh, look who it is. And go down there, and I met one of my all-time life icons, Bill Dance. If you've ever watched a fishing show, Bill Dance is the man. This is the first time I've ever been speechless in my life. I had no idea what to say to him, and we coincidentally were both wearing teal shirts. That was completely an accident. Bill Dance taught me how to fish. When I started to want to learn how to fish seriously, I watched probably 150 Bill Dance episodes on YouTube. So to meet him in person was awesome. And then on our way out the door was Toby Keith and Jimmy Houston, which are, pretty big names fishing. And Toby Keith unfortunately passed away. But I don't know if you remember, there was a viral video of him singing in a taxi cab a couple years ago. He had walked out the door of this, when I talked to him right there, he walked out the door, got in a taxi cab, and that video went crazy viral. And I was like, I just saw him like 5 minutes ago. So that was a really cool experience for me. Huge Toby Keith and country music fan, so that was awesome. And then my obsession with fishing got even worse here. This is called an amberjack. That is the hardest fighting fish I've ever caught in my life. They call them reef donkeys for a reason. That took every ounce of power I had in my body to reel that thing up. That's about a 35-pound fish. Incredibly brutal to fight, and deep water ocean fishing was awesome. That was about 100 miles offshore off the Atlantic coast of Florida, out by Orlando, because my friends wanted to fish for a Goliath grouper, which, I don't know, they're like as long as this front row of chairs. They're massive fish. That thing fought harder than the Goliath grouper. I'm not gonna lie. That was a very exciting fishing catch for me. And then my real passion is fly fishing, which, coming from Northwest Ohio, is not very common. This is the first fly fishing trip I ever went on with my friends Chester and Seth, who just walked in. And it was a disaster. We went to this renowned fishery for trout. Everybody's first fly fishing is supposed to be trout in a pristine stream. We were in the middle of Oklahoma, and I didn't catch a trout. Seth didn't catch a trout. Chester caught one trout. So my first fish on the fly was in a downtown river in Llano, Texas, as a little sunfish. But that first tug on the fly line, I didn't know what to expect, because I've caught tons of fish on just regular tackle. But something about the fly rod is just, I don't know what it is. I just love it. It's my favorite thing. We got back from a week in Florida fly fishing, and that's all I care about. It's an obsession. And I never thought I'd say that. I'll be the first one to tell you for years that I thought fly fishing was for old, rich white people. And that was my perspective on it forever. And that has changed drastically. So this is my first trip out west. This is the first legitimate wildlife documentary I made for my friend's nonprofit, Chester. He takes kids out to do wildlife encounters, kids that have been through trauma, kids that are sick, terminally ill, things of that nature. And we went to Rocky Mountain National Park. This is a Rocky Mountain bighorn peeking over a rock. And I had no concept from being a kid from Toledo what these animals were. You hear about them online, you watch documentaries with bighorns, and they talk about all these Western animals, elk, mule deer, you hear all this stuff, but then you see them in person and you just fall in love with these animals. They're very charismatic. You go here and you can see deer at side cut, you can see them in some of the metro parks, but you're out west and you can see 10 miles in every direction, and you see herds of 200 mule deer and 1,000 elk, and you're just like, what is going on? This is a whole different ball game. So this is where I fell in love with the West. It's a cliche. Everybody that goes out west say they fall in love with the West, but it's just a whole different ball game. This is a picture of a mule deer I took in Rocky Mountain National Park. Just massive animals. It's just completely different from the whitetail we have around here. Another, bighorn sheep, a female bighorn. I didn't see any male bighorns on this trip, but it was just cool to be able to get this close and take photos of them. And then this was my first time seeing the iconic bison. Such a cool animal, so much bigger than I thought they were. I didn't know what to expect, but they're like this tall. They're huge creatures. They're like a sizable Volkswagen Beetle, they always say. They're probably bigger than that. And the West, I'm out there all the time now. I love it. And, I was very excited on this trip because I've always wanted to film a moose in a Rocky Mountain National Park. I was just walking around this little marsh. I was so excited. And that changed everything for me. It also changed my opinions a lot on fly fishing. I finally had caught a trout at this point, that little guy on the left. And then the next day I went out and I caught a hybrid, which is a cutthroat and a rainbow trout. Call them a cutbow out there. That's probably the second biggest trout I've ever caught to this day. And I also learned that I'm not a trout fisherman. I have been raised, born and bred here in the Midwest where we have smallmouth and stuff, and those are about the wimpiest fish that you can catch. It's like catching a paper. You know, they don't fight that hard. I'm used to smallmouth will rip your arm off. Those things are so, you know, I'm not a dedicated trout fisherman. I am more into the big game species of fish. But I am obsessed with fly fishing, and it's taken me down a pretty crazy rabbit hole. I'm on a quest to catch 100 fish on the fly rod, and those were two new species for me then. And then next, after that, came home for a little bit after making that documentary for my friend Chester for his nonprofit. Met this guy named Jerry Mills, and Jerry Mills is a rock star. I don't know what it is, people love Jerry Mills. This is by and far the biggest Bigfoot documentary I've ever made. He's very charismatic. He's a very good storyteller. He's got the drama. He knows when to pause, and he's just got some cool stories. He's a fun guy. To this day, I think this documentary has like 630,000 views, which is insane. I never thought I would ever have anything get that viewed that much by anyone. And Jerry lives it up. He is now a Bigfoot expert. So you got to find Jerry and talk to him. He's an amazing guy, but he was really fun to be around. Seth and I were filming him, and we were both cracking up the whole time. He's got like the southern euphemisms. He's got a wisecrack for everything. Just a fun guy to be around. And then after that, you know, I went back to the Hunt Fish Podcast Summit. This is where fly fishing for me went to a whole different level. That's like a 6-pound bass, 5-pound, 6-pound. Catching that on a fly rod was just like, I'm in. I now have like 8 fly rods. I've traveled to fit. I just cannot get enough of it. That bass right there was the first time I had ever caught something and been like, if I lose this, I think I'm gonna cry. Because it's just such a crazy feeling. And you know, that just furthers my love of the outdoors. Any way to interact with the wildlife is really fun, and fishing's a great way to do that. Also, that rod is built by my good friend Captain Scooby, who lives on Lake Toledo Bend in Texas. He built that rod for me for helping him with some video, and that's one of my prized possessions. And I casted it twice and caught that fish. So that's my good luck rod. That goes everywhere with me, and no matter where I go. Wanting to see the West more, you know, my wife really had always wanted to see the redwoods, so we went on a trip out there, not for any particular purpose, just to go check it out. Still cannot get over how big these trees are. If you haven't been there yet, I mean, just go. It's expensive. The flights are absurdly expensive. You have to drive really far to get there, but 100% worth it. I will be going back there, and it's some of the coolest experiences I have in my life. And by chance, called around to a few friends who I'd filmed Bigfoot documentaries with, and you're like, hey, this is like Bigfoot Central, dude. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, that's where the Bigfoots are at. So I made some phone calls, and I ran into this guy, Carlos Jimenez. He has an anthropology degree, I think. He's done a ton of crazy Bigfoot stuff all over the world. And I called him and I was like, hey, this is my last day in California. Can I just drive to your house and interview you? And he was like, okay. So we went up there and I interviewed him, and that documentary, you know, has done pretty well. It's probably one of my favorite ones because he drove us around and took us to cool spots where historical Bigfoot things happened. And we just filmed it in his living room. I didn't even remember he was wearing shorts until I saw this picture making this documentary, or this slideshow. So, you know, you can make fun stuff happen wherever you're at. It doesn't have to be, you know, just a vacation. This took an hour of my day to go film this guy, and somehow it helped pay for the trip, which was really cool. But I think even cooler than that, my favorite part of this trip, the coolest thing I've ever seen, which never even crossed my mind, was I just call this beach elk. I don't know what else to call it. There are elk sitting on the beach in the Pacific Ocean, and I was like, nowhere in my mind had I ever considered elk on a beach. Ever. So this was one of the coolest things to see ever. It's a really crappy cell phone photo, but I still to this day can't believe that elk just are chilling on the beach. Like, they don't drink the ocean water. What are they doing out there? There's nothing, it's just sand. So maybe they just wanted to warm up. I don't know, but it's a very cool thing, beach elk. Again, back to Ohio. This is my friend Amy and Tina. They run a thing called Project Zoo Book, which is like a Bigfoot research program. They live over by Youngstown area, so we went out, Seth and I went out there to interview them. That was a fun interview. These ladies are a riot. They are just fun to be around. They drug us all over that area. We filmed a bunch of cool stuff, and it was sadly like some of our worst performing Bigfoot documentaries. I don't know why, because it's really interesting. They have really interesting stories. But Ohio apparently is like a Bigfoot spot where a lot of people see Bigfoot. So I didn't know that until I started research or doing interviews with these guys. Not long after that, I got another call from my friend Chester, and he said, "Do you want to go to Yellowstone National Park?" And again, yes, absolutely. So Seth took this photo. We have one of those. We're both like seasoned photographers and videographers, but I have this little crappy like 90s retro camera, and we took so many photos on that. So he took a photo of me up in this, it's like 12,000 feet. We were filming some really cool things called mountain goats. We almost missed our flight out because like just so enamored with these animals. They're such cool animals. I never thought I'd see one in person. Apparently they're not even native to this area. So they dropped them off or something. But it was still very cool to see them. They were actually climbing on the cars at the top of the mountain. They were jumping on people's cars, and I was like, man, I hope they don't jump on a rental car, because I really do not want to pay the service fee. But yeah, I just was so enthralled with seeing these animals that we were like flying back to the airport to not miss our plane. So that's the price you pay for wildlife. Yellowstone is by far the coolest place I've ever been. I'm going back this year, or next year for sure. And I caught a species that was really cool to catch, which is a Yellowstone cutthroat trout. They're pretty rare. They only live in that region. So it was very cool. And I'll tell you, there is nothing more enthralling than fly fishing when you know that you're in grizzly country. The only thing I thought is, like, I don't have any protection against a grizzly bear in the middle of this park. So we were very far from the car too, but luckily there was other people around, so I figured, we'd get them first. But yeah, it's the most beautiful place I've ever fly fished. It's very scenic everywhere you go in Yellowstone. Saw, Old Faithful, a lot of that stuff. It's cool. It's cool, but I'm way more interested in the wildlife. All the tourist stuff is awesome. I would definitely recommend seeing it. They got those like multicolored pools and the heated things, but like that to me is one of the coolest things ever. Just seeing bison in their natural grazing grounds. And I've done a lot of reading about the American bison, the history of the American bison. And to imagine, in my mind, Seth and I probably sat here for hours, and I just thought that used to just be covered with bison, like ants. So it's pretty cool conservation comeback story. There were only a few hundred left, and now there's, tens of thousands maybe if we're lucky. But it's if you haven't learned about bison and their history as a conservation story, it's very, very crazy stuff. They were almost gone forever, and they're like an iconic. They're like more iconic than the bald eagle. Like, they can't get any more American than the bison. And we did did two documentaries while we were here, and you can find us all on my website if you want to watch any of this stuff. I make everything available to the public because I don't really care about film festivals and stuff. I want people to learn. So this is a documentary that we made about kids that we took to Yellowstone with Chester that kind of got to experience this firsthand, and just to watch them really fall in love with the place is really amazing. And then we did a story about the National Bighorn Sheep Center, which is right outside Yellowstone, right outside Grand Tetons, basically. And they have a very cool mission there, just conserving wild sheep. So that was really awesome. Got 2 documentaries out of that trip. And then we're going to go to the shark stuff. This is last year. This was Dr. Greg Scomal. He is one of the world-renowned shark scientists. So just to be sitting there talking to a guy who's spent his entire adult career learning about great white sharks is very awesome. He signed the book. He wrote a book about great white sharks I'd highly recommend if you're interested in sharks. It's kind of like the whole history of great white sharks on the Atlantic coast. And he's a very nice guy, and he was generous enough to give us time to do an interview with him. He's on National Geographic, Discovery Channel, all of that stuff all the time on Shark Week. So to like get to sit a few feet from him and ask questions was crazy to me. I never thought I would be doing any of that. And then, you know, back to where I started with filming this great white shark is the most surreal moment. I want to get under the water with one of those things in a cage, but that's a little expensive. I have to figure out the logistics on that one. But I want to see these things up close. Seeing them above the water is very cool, but seeing them below the water I think would be a whole new experience, and it doesn't get any more top of the food chain than that. I mean, that's an apex predator, and you know, there's a lot to be said about learning about cool like micro animals and bacterias and plants and stuff, but when you're standing next to an apex predator, that's like a powerful moment. You can feel that, whether it's a mountain lion or a great white shark or anything at that level. It's just it's visceral. Like something deep in your DNA is like, man, I should not be here right now. This is messing with me. So if you ever do go out to Cape Cod, the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy has a building there with it's like a museum of great white shark stuff. Highly recommend checking that out. And you can do eco tours where they take you out on these boats and you can see the great white sharks, which is super cool. Top 2 life experiences for me. And then this is the documentary, which you can watch if you're so inclined. It's on my YouTube channel, and it's also on Chester's YouTube channel. You can find it on the Aptitude Outdoors website. This is probably the most ambitious documentary we've ever done. We interviewed Guy Harvey, the guy that has the cool t-shirts and all those designs. We interviewed tons of leading shark scientists. We interviewed a guy who saw a great white shark in the Gulf of Mexico. It was a challenging documentary. It was very fun, and then got to go to a lot of cool places doing that one. And then out of the blue, I had mentioned Gray Thornton earlier. I had been to an event and ran into him, and we talked for a while, and I got home from the event, and a day later my phone rings and he goes, hey Paul, do you think you could go to Arizona next week? And I'm like, yeah, that's, you know, when you get these opportunities, you don't say no. I didn't know what I was doing. I just said, yes, I'll go to Arizona, wherever you want to do. The Wild Sheep Foundation does tons of research on wild sheep. If you don't know, wild sheep have a lot of issues, conservation issues. They're losing habitat rapidly. They have a version of pneumonia that was brought over by domestic sheep that they really have like no immunity to, so it's really killing them off badly. There's a ton of wildlife, exotic wildlife that is kind of running them off of their territory and passing on the disease as well, like aoudad. These exotic animals they bring in from other countries, places like Texas that have big game ranches. They get loose. They're prolific breeders. So the Wild Sheep Foundation does work all over the western half of the country and the Dakotas everywhere, and all over the world really for any bighorned ungulate. So in Arizona, it's a desert. Clearly water is a big problem. So they had me go out and film one of their projects that they were building literally in the middle of the desert. Like, this is where I slept. No tents, no nothing. Like, we slept here on a cot, and awesome. If you ever get a chance to just sleep in the desert, it rules. Those cactuses are probably like 15 feet tall, and you're just sleeping under them in the moon. We were there, it was full moon, so it's like sleeping in daylight. Got probably down in the 50s, and it got up to like 105 in the middle of the day. I'm not built for 105 degree weather in any capacity. It was a brutal, brutal thing, but this is the projects they build. So this is called a guzzler. They have different names for them depending on what part of the country you're in, but essentially it's a rainwater catchment. Those are gigantic, I think they're 1,000 gallons a piece or something, water tanks. So they basically build this giant roof with a slant on the side of a mountain, and when it rains, the water runs down. It starts here. So this is all a big ramp that goes all the way down, and there's an eaves trough on the end, and it drops into those tanks. The tanks fill up, and then on the other side of it, there's basically like an in-ground swimming pool that's built in with steps, and the sheep can come drink from that because they're trying to expand their habitat. And it's a very cool program because there was a guy that donated this land to the Wild Sheep Foundation because he lives in the city just outside this mountain range, which high up on the mountains you can see where he lives from like 15 miles away, but it's like an hour and a half car ride through the desert to get there. He donated the land. They built this in. I mean, there was helicopters. We had to drive like 30 minutes through these crazy graded roads to get up there. They had to fly all of this stuff in. It's very expensive projects. But I was really happy to learn about that and be part of it. And it was, aside from sweating to death out there, it was very cool. And these guys are all volunteers that helped do this. They're ex-board members of the Wild Sheep Foundation, members of the Arizona Wild Sheep Foundation. Just like, these aren't just, you know, random dudes. These are guys out there working and doing it. So that was a really cool project. Hottest project I've ever filmed. And I was worried my camera's going to blow up from how hot it was out there. Broke a lot of stuff, got sand in a lot of stuff. And then I got a call. This is Lyle Blackburn. He's become a friend of mine. He is, you know, kind of big in the, you know, Bigfoot world. He does a lot of those TV shows like Ken Gearhart and those other guys. Him and Chester were doing research on a thing of like there might be these tribes of Native Americans that still exist, like as they were 100 years ago, 200 years ago in the Texas swamps. So we shot a documentary about that, and it was very cool. That is out on Chester's YouTube channel. It's actually pretty fun documentary. It doesn't get into like crazy Bigfoot lore or anything. It's just kind of like a research into this weird phenomenon about could people still be surviving like they did out west or in the eastern United States in a native way. Verdict's out. Probably be pretty tough on the East Coast with considering how populated the East Coast is, but hey, you can decide for yourself. This is the documentary if you want to watch it. It's not, none of these are super long. They're all about a half hour. And this was the 5th year at our Hunt Fish Podcast Summit. It was really fun to be able to see something grow from nothing to having some of the icons of conservation and all these people out here, and I was glad to be able to be part of that. Then we put out a documentary. Seth and I went back down to Southern Ohio and filmed another documentary about Bigfoot. And this one's a little longer. This is like 45 minutes or so. A lot of these guys are like the newer YouTube stars of the Bigfoot stuff. I just have met over the years doing this stuff. And they're pretty cool. They're pretty nice people. I got to interview a lot of them and kind of see what they think about the phenomenon. But again, pushing that conservation message. It's my main objective. We're getting pretty recent here. This is my friend Captain Scooby, who I had mentioned earlier, hired me to come down and film a commercial for his fly fishing rods that he custom builds. And it was in South Padre Island, Texas, which is like world-class redfish fishing. They're like one of the top tier game fish for fly fishermen. They're very difficult to catch. That's the only one I caught on the entire trip. And I fished for like 10 hours straight. He was like, you know, what do you want paid for this trip? And I said, I want a whole day of fly fishing for redfish. And that was a mistake because I only caught one fish. But it was totally worth it. That is, on the fly rod, that's the hardest fighting fish I've ever caught. And I'm obsessed with it now. That's Captain Scooby. He is, we call him the mad scientist. He just has a shop in his backyard and he just builds fly rods, and they are insane. I don't know, like, I'm not that good of a fly caster, but his rods, I can send his rods like 80 feet, which is not, you shouldn't be able to do that. I'm not a good caster. So he makes really good stuff, and that commercial should be coming out soon. And this is a California bighorn sheep. I was just in Oregon in October to film this for the Wild Sheep Foundation. And you know, I don't expect everyone to be, you know, pro hunting or everything, but this is just, you know, what their conservation does. This isn't released yet, so this is part of they're going to be playing this at their big conference. But this kid, he had cancer, and his family is a big hunting family, and it was really hard to film this documentary because like the kid, he's 16 years old, he has cancer, and they came in and this is a once-in-a-lifetime hunt. If you don't know about any of that, like sheep, you basically have to be a millionaire to hunt a wild sheep. They're just so absurdly expensive. The tags are very limited to hunt anywhere in the country. And a lot of people came together to donate this hunt to him. The landowner owns thousands of acres out in Oregon. He donated his time and his land and all this. It's a long story, but definitely the hardest documentary I've ever filmed, because it was just like hard not to just sit there and cry, because you're just like, this kid is tougher than me, you know, and he's got, you know, way bigger problems than I have. It makes you kind of put life in perspective, but it was the most brutal filming conditions I've ever been in as well. It poured the entire day. I have never filmed in rain like that. So it's a good vouch for Sony cameras. They held up in the rain. Neither of my cameras broke. But yeah, we just basically had to sit there for hours like that. We climbed down these mountains. We were up and down them all day. That's a sheer ledge below us. And the kid was tough. He didn't complain 1 second. So it was a pretty amazing experience for me. That should be coming out here in probably a couple of months. They're going to play it at their banquet and things like that. And then I got home from that. I was home for a week, and Women Hunt called me and asked me to come film their training camp, which if you know somebody who wants to learn how to hunt, a female, this is a great program. They basically have women, they fly them down to a world-class ranch in Texas, trained by elite snipers, literally like Navy SEALs, snipers. They teach them how to shoot, they teach them about the weapons, they teach them about safety. The group of girls that I went with to film had never shot guns before, and on the third day they were at the camp, they shot a target at 1,000 yards, which is, I don't know if you know anything about shooting, that's insane. Like, I couldn't shoot probably 100 yards accurately, and these girls are shooting 1,000 yards. So very happy to be able to do that. The Texas Hill Country is gorgeous. I just love doing it. Same hat, I only have one. Really cool being out there and just being able to be part of that landscape and be part of, you know, watching these women do something that's really important to them. If you've never hunted before, like it's really emotional for a lot of people. And seeing these girls do that was very awesome. It's a great program. I support it as much as I can. And this was a girl called Brooklyn. She's actually she's like 21, and she's a bush pilot up in Canada. And she's very cool. So that was her face after she shot. She's like, didn't know what to do. She was very excited. So it was cool to be part of that program. And then recently, this was last week, I just went to Florida, blow off some steam. Been a pretty busy year for filming for me, so I went down there, and I love fishing, fly fishing in general, but like fishing for invasive fish is a cool thing that I really like to do, because it's like, why not? They shouldn't be there anyway. Those are Oscars. I don't know if you've ever had like the aquarium fish Oscars. They get massive in aquarium tanks. These guys were pretty fun. They fight very hard. It's my good luck rod again. But we just drove up and down Highway 41 in the Everglades and just fished the canals all day long for 3 or 4 days, my friend Chester and I. And once in a lifetime experience, behind me is a canal, under me is a pipeline, and I was casting to what would be my left, and it was like literally every cast I was catching one of these fish. And I go to pull one up, and this guy jumps out of the water and eats my fish, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, this has never happened to me before. Luckily, I've fished long enough with a fly rod over the last couple of years to know to point my rod tip straight down, because if you let it go like this, alligators, if you don't know, can pull pretty hard. Their tails are pretty massive. So the rod tip started bending down like this, and I was like, he's gonna break my rod in half. So I bent it so it straightened out, and he pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled, and finally my line snapped, and I was dying laughing. That was the craziest thing fishing I've ever had happen, but it was really fun too. The alligator was very cool. He only had like one eye. It was like the Happy Gilmore alligator. He had like one pink eye, and that was very cool. And took a day. I'd never been to the Florida Keys, so we drove down. We got to hand feed some tarpon. It's like a tourist thing you can do down there. Dream fish. I've always wanted to catch a tarpon on the fly rod ever since I started, so I just kind of like scouting a little bit, see what's possible down there. They're a little bigger than I thought they were, so that's going to have to be a little more training on my end. But the real reason I want to go down to the Keys with my friend Chester is to shoot these deer, shoot them as in film them. These are a subspecies of the American whitetail. They're called the key deer, and they look like a whitetail, except for they're literally this tall. Like that's a fully grown adult male buck, and it's like the size of a golden retriever. And they are amazing. They're an endangered species. They were down to a population of 50 at one time, which is insane. And then the Boone and Crockett Club sent a game warden down to the Florida Keys to enforce the poaching that was going on. So they're now making a pretty big comeback. There's a few hundred now, still not a lot, but they're on a little island called Big Pine Key, and south in the Keys. So if you ever go to the Florida Keys, go to Big Pine Island Key and go see them. They just live in like the neighborhoods. I shot this deer in a residential neighborhood down there. It was very cool. So if you want a dog-sized deer, you want to see one, that's your thing. Also down there, this is coming out on Saturday. This is a new documentary I'm putting out. This is a lady named Tammy, and we just interviewed her while we were down there, and I just literally finished it this morning. So it's a pretty interesting Skunk Ape Florida Bigfoot documentary coming out this week. And that's pretty much it. But I wanted to end, I wanted to let people know that, like, this isn't, my life isn't like a crazy thing. It's just like I get to do this stuff, and I'm very, lucky to do this stuff. But I think anybody could do this. You don't have to have any special talents. I did not go to film school. I didn't do anything crazy to be able to do this. I just showed up when people asked me, and I worked on it. I just worked on my skill. If you want to go take photos of cool animals or learn how to fish or do that trip you always wanted to do, you just gotta go do it. I have done nothing special. The fact that Craig called me and wanted me to talk, I'm like, about what? I sit at a computer all day and edit videos. In my mind, that's what I do. So just go out there and do stuff. Life's short. You don't get a lot of time to do the things you want to do. So just go do it. Costs money. You can always make more money. It's not that big of a deal, but you don't get to do cool stuff every day. So that's all I got. If you want to learn anything more, you can go to my website, aptitudeoutdoors.com. I have business cards up here if you want them for any reason. Anybody that needs wildlife filmmaking work done, I'm sure you guys are clamming at the bit to get people to do wildlife filmmaking work for you. But that's it. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead. If not, have a good evening. Appreciate you guys having me out to do this. Yes?
The people you interview, when you run that on your YouTube channel, do they expect like a percentage of proceeds back, or they just do it for?
No. I mean, I'm not like rolling in the dough. It's like.
So it's not a name and likeness type of thing where they just give you permission to use.
Yeah, I mean, these are just normal people that I interview. I mean, by the time I buy a flight and a rental car and a hotel, I'm in the hole on these Bigfoot documentaries. Like, it's just like a passion project. It's fun. I get to travel, mostly do it. I try and pick places where I can fly fish, and I go and film the documentary to offset the cost. It's not like, people talk about YouTube influencers. I don't consider myself that. So it pays.
Not yet.
Yeah.
And my other question is, are you a believer in Bigfoot?
Currently, no. I do not believe in Bigfoot. I've never seen a Bigfoot. I've been out at night with a ton of people doing this Bigfoot stuff.
Do you know anybody that's met Bigfoot?
Oh yeah, every single person I've ever interviewed. And I'm not talking bad about them. I just personally haven't seen anything. I've heard some weird stuff out there with these people, but it could be anything. Wildlife make weird noises. I make weird noises. It could be anything. Seth and I have some recordings that sound like what people say a Bigfoot sounds like. Could it be a guy yelling on his porch? I don't know. So, I'm a very scientifically based person. I don't have anything against these people who say this stuff. I'm not going to call them liars because I sit there in a room with them for an hour and a half and they tell me their story. I'm like, what do I know? So I can't say that I've seen anything or believe anything 100%, but hey. What's life without a little mystery, You got to keep a little mystery out there. We find endangered species and stuff that we thought was extinct all the time, so why not? Why couldn't Bigfoot be out there? That's my thoughts on it.
Well, when you said you interviewed some people that thought there were some Native Americans living like they did X hundred years ago, can you expand on that a little bit? Or
So,
where do they think they are or whatever?
So if you've ever been into like the swamps of East Texas or Louisiana, I mean, it gets thick and it gets, easy to get lost in very quickly. So the premise is there could be remnant populations of what they call feral humans. I don't know if that's the greatest way to put it, but that's what they say. Feral humans living out in the swamps or I mean, there's that story of, I can't remember his name, but out west, he was like the last surviving member of a Native American tribe, and he eventually just walked into a city and was like, I can't live by myself out in the wild anymore, it's too lonely. So it's just stories like that. They think that there could be like maybe like a couple people still living like that, because in the documentary we talked to a guy, and you know, it's all anecdotal. It's all just like Bigfoot, it's all anecdotal evidence, like, well, I know a guy who saw this, and I know a guy who's had somebody shoot an arrow at him in the woods, and it looked like an old, you know, Native American arrow. Like, does that mean it was a Native American living in the woods off the grid for 200 years in this unbroken chain of civilization? Are there guys that make recreation Native American bows and are crazy and shoot them at people? It could be one or the other. So you know what I mean? So, like, we don't approach this stuff as like, this is what's happening. It's just like, this is what we've heard. This is what people are telling us. We've had people give us reports on this stuff. Could it be out there? So, I don't know. I don't have an answer, but it's cool. You go out in the woods and sit out there at night, and it's just creepy in general, which is always fun. So, yeah, there's a book called, it's about, the author's name is Rob Riggs. It's some obscure book, and it's full of a bunch of wacky stuff, but it's called something in Search of the Wild Man, Big Thicket in Search of the Wild Man, which I read as research for the documentary, and it was full of like stories like that of like, I knew a sheriff who talked to a guy who had an arrow shot at him, or saw a person dressed in Native American clothing in the swamps. So, I don't know. The feral human phenomenon is what they call it. What that means, I'm not sure. So.
Have you filmed anything with the migratory birds that come up to Lake Erie?
Yeah, I haven't filmed a documentary, but I mean, Seth and I have gone out a ton of times and shot photos of the birds, and I love doing that. If you're into wildlife photography, I mean, that's one of the hardest things to film is birds. They're just so fast, they move so fast, and you're shooting a lens this big at a bird this big, and it takes 30 seconds to find it, and by the time you find it, it's gone. So, yeah, I love shooting photo and video of birds. It's really fun. I haven't made anything specifically about it. That's not like it's not like my passion in wildlife is the birding stuff. I appreciate it, and I really like doing it, and I appreciate the birds, but I'm more into like the big game stuff. I just like going out west and seeing those big animals. So, I don't know if that answered your question or not.
And then, which camera type are you using? Are you using Nikon, Canon, Sony?
I shoot with Sony. I used to shoot with Nikon, but Sony is just really, really convenient for wildlife. It just has really good autofocus, and it's expensive, but it works really good.
If I was getting into it, should I just go straight to Sony, or should I?
You don't have to. No, I would say just get whatever you can afford, because I mean there's like no doubt wildlife lenses are insanely expensive. Like I've just got my lens I've been wanting for years, like this week literally, and I've worked my butt off doing that stuff for a decade to be able to afford it. I would just get whatever. I mean, my first camera I had was a Nikon I bought at Best Buy, and that lens was a 300 millimeter. I mean, that's plenty to get started. Seth still shoots with a 400 millimeter to this day. I like the bigger lenses. Probably just because it makes me feel cool. I don't know. You don't need a big lens like that for most things unless you're actually like doing the work. But yeah, I would just get whatever you can afford, because Sony. I mean, there are like older models of the Sony cameras that are still pretty affordable and have good autofocus. Like they just came out with the A7 IV. You sent me down a rabbit hole. They have the A7 III, which is a pretty affordable now, since they have two models that came out past it with still has really good autofocus. And you can get used lenses if you want to get into wildlife photography. That's where I'd start. But any brand that has a lens and a camera that you can afford, you get started and just go shoot constantly. Get obsessed with it, and it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Do you fly drones at all?
I don't. Seth does. I've been too lazy to get my drone license. I'm one of those people that if I don't care about something, I just have zero interest in it at all. Like, I don't watch sports. I don't like play video games. I'm just like, this is all I care about. It's a fault in some ways, but yeah, I'm not a drone guy. I should be, because every client I do video work's like, can you bring a drone? I'm like, no. It's a $100,000 fine if you don't have your license, and I haven't gotten it yet. So, not my thing. Seth does. He's a drone guy. I let him handle all the fun stuff. Any other questions?
Thanks a lot, Paul.
Yeah, thanks guys.